Ready? Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unclench Your Jaw with me, Nemo, a strength and conditioning coach, somatic yin yoga therapist, mother of one, friend to many, secretly the most loved. And I don't even think that it's secretly anymore because, you guys have been listening to me. No, it's not. Publicly the most loved relative and still very much the favorite sister. Um, and owner of more tattoos than sensible decisions. And a woman who regularly reminds people to unclench their jaw. So, welcome to Unclench Your Jaw with Nemo. As always, this is a podcast for your nervous system, a place where you get curious about attachment, relationships, parenting, healing, whatever that looks like to you, trauma, resilience, and all the wonderfully messy things that make us human. Now, before we begin, I would invite you to notice your shoulders, notice your breath, notice your jaw. If it's clenched, you're in exactly the right place. Take a slow breath in and an even slower breath out. Now, can I ask you something? When is the last time you played? Not exercise, not watch television, not scrolled through social media and all those games that are on there, not cleaned the house while convincing yourself it counts as movement, not video games, but played. Kati, shake. You remember shake, the one where we used to draw lines on the ground, and you have two teams, and the whole point of the game was, well, for the team that was outside, the whole point was to get to the end of the lines and back without being tapped. And for the team that was guarding the lines, you had to. The best bit was when you caught the other team, all of them in one box, and it became a stalemate. So that's the kind of playing I'm talking about. And three sticks, my favorite of all time was three sticks. That's what I mean by played. When was the last time you laughed so hard your stomach hurt? When was the last time you danced in the kitchen simply because a song made your body want to move, right? When did you last build something, paint something, climb something, kick a ball around, splash in the sea, get muddy? Kwanza, the get muddy, it's fun. Especially when you're older, it's so much fun. When is the last time you made a mess? Or when is the last time you did something that served absolutely no purpose other than the joy of doing it? Yeah. For some of you, an answer may have arrived immediately. For others, they may have been silence. And I wonder if that silence tells us something. I think adults often believe that play belongs to children. We imagine it as something we graduated from, almost like baby teeth or school uniforms. It's something lovely, but something we eventually outgrow. I don't think it's true. I think what many of us outgrow isn't play, it's permission. Somewhere along the way, life became serious and productivity replaced curiosity. Responsibility replaced imagination. Efficiency replaced delight. And we've become very good at doing things that are useful, and quietly stop doing things that simply make us feel alive. So today, as always, I've got my young people that I want to introduce, and I want to introduce you to someone called Nema. Nema is 7 years old. She absolutely loves drawing. Not that she's particularly good at it. In fact, if we're being honest, giraffes do not look anything like giraffes, maybe more like a unicorn. But she doesn't care. She fills pages with color. She makes up stories about magical villages where goats can fly and grandmothers ride bicycles to the moon. Every afternoon, after school, she'll sit under a mango tree and just, not necessarily a mango tree, she could even sit in the dining room or the TV room and just draw. Spend hours on her notebook with a handful of colored pencils that are getting shorter by the day because, sharpening and a lot of drawing. Then something changes. Her mother becomes ill. Her father starts working longer hours. Their younger siblings to feed, uniforms to wash, homework to supervise. Nobody sits Nema down and says, your childhood is over. Life doesn't work like that, does it? Instead, one small responsibility becomes another. She helps with dinner because mom is tired. She watches the younger children while dad finishes some work on his laptop. She washes the dishes because there's nobody else to do it. She tells herself, I'll draw tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And before long, the colored pencils are still sitting in a tin where she left them, just gathering dust. Years pass. Nema grows into exactly the kind of woman everyone admires. She's dependable, organized, reliable. She's exceptionally capable. She's a person who remembers birthdays, pays bills on time, turns up early, never lets anyone down. And somehow, with all that still going on, she manages to keep everyone else's life running smoothly. People describe her using words like responsible, mature, sensible. Nobody ever uses the word playful. Not because she's not capable of joy, because somewhere along the line, uh, she decided quietly that joy could wait. The thing about children is they don't just play because it's fun. They play because that's how they're designed to learn about the world. Play is how children discover who they are. It's how they practice relationships. Remember, I used to play mommy, daddy, nurse, doctor. All these games imitating what was going on around us. We'd sit on a chair with friends sitting on chairs behind us, and we're the bus driver. All these games, right? It's how children experiment with courage. Um, it's how they learn to solve problems. It's how they discover creativity. It's how they regulate big emotions, build confidence, and how they recover from stress. Play isn't the opposite of work. Shocking, isn't it? Play is part of healthy development. And when we take play away from a child, we don't simply remove games. Sometimes we interrupt the development of curiosity itself. And I think that's something that we rarely talk about, which is a shame. We often speak about children who had to grow up too quickly with admiration. They're so mature. They've got an old head on their shoulders. We say these things like in awe. They've always been so responsible, but we rarely stop to ask what that child had to give up in order to become this responsible person. Because every time a child becomes the adult in a room, a little bit of childhood quietly leaves. And it's never dramatic. It's not some big dramatic moment. It doesn't bounce all at once. It's an afternoon at a time, one responsibility at a time, one missed game at a time, one postponed dream at a time. Let's pause here for a moment. I invite you to notice your shoulders. Relax your shoulders. I invite you to notice your breath. Deep inhale, slow exhale. I invite you to notice your jaw and clench your jaw. Now ask yourself something gently. What did you love doing as a child before life became something to manage? Don't think too hard. Let your body answer first. Perhaps a memory has already appeared, a bicycle, a football, nyabs, a skipping rope. And by the way, if you don't know what nyabs are, you're not my age. But yeah, nyabs, a skipping rope, a tree that you always climbed, music that you danced to, swimming in a river with friends, making up stories, or just running around with cousins until someone shouted dinner was ready. Whatever came into your mind, stay with it. I have a feeling that little memory isn't random. I think it might be introducing us to a part of you that's been waiting very patiently to be noticed again. And that's where I'd like us to begin. Now, if you can allow your mind to wander back to the child you once were, not the child smiling in the family photographs, but the child nobody else saw, the one who had a favorite game, a favorite place to hide, favorite adventures. You know, you and your friends had a place you'd go and call it adventure. I remember when I was younger, we lived in Riverside Drive, which was kind of close to Westlands, not that close, but kind of close to Westlands. And me and my friends would say we're going on an adventure and would actually be walking to Westlands. Actually, some of the things we did being a child is being fearless. And so we'd walk to Westlands and we'd call it our adventure. And that's what I'm talking about. The wonderful imagination that can turn an empty cardboard box into a castle or a spaceship or even that bus I'm talking about. Now ask yourself another question. When did life become so serious? And I don't mean when did life become difficult. Those are two different things. Difficulty is part of being human. Seriousness, however, is something many of us slowly adopt because we believe it's what adulthood requires. You can't be an adult if you're not serious, can you? Somewhere along the way, we begin to confuse responsibility with joylessness. Huh? We start believing that mature people don't play. They don't laugh too loudly. They don't make a mess. They don't dance wildly in the kitchen. They don't climb trees. They don't build sandcastles, do they? They certainly do not jump in the sea with all their clothes on just because the water looks inviting. They become sensible, useful, productive. Na kwanza hapo productive, it's like a buzzword in adulthood. Productive. I sometimes think adulthood just has like a really, really bad marketing department. It really does. We were sold this idea that growing up means becoming more efficient. We celebrate being busy as though exhaustion was some kind of Olympic event. I was so tired, I haven't slept in 5 days, and and people, quite especially people of corporate, it's like a badge of honor if you haven't slept. Do you how long? Wearing it like a medal of honor. What the beep is that about? Someone asks how we are, how are you doing? And we reply, busy. And we're very proud of that busy. Somewhere we've decided that if we're not rushing from one responsibility to the next, we must somehow be wasting our time. I am so grateful for my mama. She showed me what relaxing and chilling was. That chick could chill from Friday to Sunday and do nothing. Just read her book and like really just relax and nervous system kila kitu just chilling. And I've learned from her. Chilling bila shame or guilt, right? Watching Netflix, listening to Ziki. And why? Because I want to. I'll switch off my phone on Friday and switch it on Monday. Mtani tafta, as long as the people who I know and love know what is happening. The rest of you, mneza mnipige mtachoka. Monday the phone will go back on. Do you know what I mean? And if pals call at let's go hang out on Nini, they're met with a solid no, they jua. And I do not explain what my no is or why I've said no. It's because no explanation is needed. But I love my pals because they know me and they don't pressure me. But I wonder who convinced us at that resting, laughing, or playing needed to be earned, right? And perhaps that's why so many adults feel guilty the moment they stop doing something useful. Have you ever sat down to read a book and that you're genuinely enjoying, only to find yourself thinking, like after maybe 3, 4 pages in, hey, yes, I really should be doing there are dishes in the sink. I need to go and wash the dishes. Or perhaps you've gone for a walk and instead of noticing the trees or the birds or the breeze in your face, you've spent the entire time writing tomorrow's to do list, right? Our bodies might be outside, our nervous systems are still at work. Let's meet Hassan. Hassan is 11 years old. And if you ask any adult in his hood what he's like, they'll tell you the same thing. Mashallah, he's a wonderful boy, so responsible, such a little gentleman. Every morning before Hassan goes to school, he'll sweep the compound, he'll fetch water, he'll help his grandma make breakfast, he'll walk with his little sister before making it to his own classroom just before the bell rings. One afternoon, his friends knock on the gate. Hassan, kuja ucheze football, eh? Or come and play football. And he looks towards the kitchen where his grandma is. I was going to say nyanya, but nyanya is tomato. Is nyanya is grandmother, right? Yeah, nyanya is grandmother. Anyway, let's not nini with my my bad Swahili. That one should be left for the TikToks. Anyway, so he looks towards his shosho who's making supper, and he shouts back, "I can't, pengine kesho, maybe tomorrow." Tomorrow comes, same answer. Eventually, his friends stop knocking. It reminds me of a poster that I sometimes see in kiosks that they say, "Ask for credit tomorrow, I will give it to you." And every time you come the next day and ask for credit, the shopkeeper points at the poster and says, kesho. So kesho never comes. And they don't stop knocking for Hassan because they don't like him, but they assume he's always busy. Years later, Hassan can't understand why he feels so disconnected from other people, his colleagues, his acquaintances. People respect him, but friendships just feel strangely unfamiliar. Deep down inside of him, he still believes relationships are built through usefulness rather than a shared joy. Nobody ever taught him that play is where many friendships are born. Think about your closest friendships. And I wonder how many of them began because you were productive together. Probably very few. Most of them probably began because you laughed together, ridiculously laughed loud, belly aches, that one of falling on the floor and throwing your feet up laughing. Um, you shared maybe a ridiculous moment. You told stories, you played. And play is one of the ways human beings build trust. When children invent games together, they're not just passing time. They're learning negotiation, cooperation, imagination, empathy. They're learning repair. They're discovering what happens when someone cheats, when someone gets hurt, when someone loses, when someone wins, and when someone says, "Hey, yo, let's start again." Play quietly teaches us that relationships can survive mistakes. And that's a remarkable lesson, don't you think? It's one many adults never fully received. Now, there's something else I'd like us to think about. Children don't play because they're avoiding reality. Children play because they are learning how to live in reality. Every time a child pretends a stick is a sword, a spoon is an airplane, their brain is building creativity, flexibility, and resilience. They're practicing solving problems that don't yet exist. They're learning to imagine different endings to the same story. That's one of the reasons play matters so much to the nervous system. Play tells the body something profound. In this moment, I am safe enough to be curious. And I'm going to say it again. Play tells the body, in this moment, I am safe enough to be curious. Safe enough to be curious. When the nervous system is in survival mode, curiosity disappears. There's no time for imagination when you're trying to stay safe. There's no energy for delight when you're scanning the room for danger. There's no space for silliness when you're carrying responsibilities far beyond your years. Survival narrows the world. Play expands it. As as adults, we often ask, why don't I feel creative anymore? Or why do I struggle to relax? Or even, why do I feel guilty whenever I'm enjoying myself? And perhaps the better question is not what's wrong with me. Perhaps the better question is, when did my nervous system learn that joy was something to postpone? Yep. Let's pause here. Inhale, exhale slowly. Notice your jaw and clench your jaw. I'd now like you to picture yourself at about 8 or 9 years old. Imagine 8 or 9 year old you is standing a few meters away from you. Look carefully. What are they wearing? What expression is on their face? What did they love before the adults in their world began asking them to carry more than they should? Now imagine asking them a simple question. What do you want to do today? Don't answer for them. Just listen. And you might be surprised by what comes back. Perhaps they want to climb a tree. Perhaps they want to draw. Perhaps they want to swim. Perhaps they simply want someone to play with them. Whatever they answer, notice how your body responds, because I have a suspicion that the child inside many of us hasn't disappeared. They've simply been just beating time, waiting very patiently for someone to remember that they're there. And maybe that's why, or what we're really doing today. We're not trying to become children again. We're trying to remember the parts of ourselves that only ever came alive when we felt safe enough to play. Now let's sit with that for a moment, huh? Notice your shoulders, your breath. Notice your jaw. And I wonder if you've noticed something over the last 2 episodes. We haven't really been talking about childhood. We've been talking about adulthood. Childhood is simply where the story begins. And today's story isn't really about toys or games either. It's really about permission to laugh, to rest, to be spontaneous, to enjoy your own life without feeling guilty about it. I sometimes ask clients a question that sometimes catches them completely off guard. What do you do for fun? And it's amazing how often it will go quiet. Whether we are doing a virtual session or a face to face, a physical session, quiet, silence. Some people will laugh because they think I'm joking. What do you mean? What do I do for fun? Others begin listing responsibilities. I like cooking. I like sijui nini. I like is that fun, or does everyone need to eat? I enjoy gardening. Do you enjoy it, or is it another thing that has to be done? I like going shopping. Are you going shopping for yourself or because the house needs groceries? We're so used to measuring our lives by usefulness that we sometimes struggle to recognize joy when it actually appears. That isn't because we've forgotten how to have fun. It's because our nervous systems have become incredibly efficient at asking one question. Is this productive? Is this thing productive? Rarely do we stop and ask another question. Does this make me feel alive? And those are such different questions. Let me introduce you to Miriam. Miriam is a 46-year-old. She works hard, she's dependable. Her colleagues adore her because she always says yes. Her family adore her because she's the one who remembers everything again: birthdays, appointments, school meetings, prescriptions, shopping list, anniversaries, everyone's favorite meal. And if life were held together by sticky notes, Miriam would own the entire shop. Anyway, one Saturday morning, her daughter walks into the kitchen and says, "Mom, to the beach. Let's go to the beach." Miriam doesn't even look up from the washing. "I've got too much to do." Her daughter smiles and, "We'll still have washing tomorrow. The sea will still be there tomorrow." Miriam tells her daughter. So the daughter then asks her, "So why can't we go, Leo? Why is it we can't go, Leo? If they'll be there, yes, tomorrow, but why can't we go today?" Miriam stops folding the towels. She opens her mouth, turns round, turns round to talk to her daughter, opens her mouth, and nothing comes out because she genuinely doesn't know why not. She doesn't know why she feels guilty about stopping. She doesn't know why resting feels uncomfortable. She doesn't know why joy feels like something that has to be earned. She simply knows that sitting on the beach while there are dishes in the sink somehow feels wrong, that it's laziness. Now, the thing is, it's a nervous system that learned long ago that productivity keeps you safe. The irony is that many people who struggle to play are incredibly good at organizing fun for everyone else. They're the parents planning birthday parties, they're the aunties organizing Christmas, the uncles arranging family gatherings, the friend who remembers everyone's birthday, the coaches who encourage children to enjoy sport, the yoga teachers reminding everyone else to breathe. Yeah? Sometimes we're remarkably generous at giving other people permission to experience the very things we've quietly denied ourselves. Now, I want you to ask yourself something gently. When was the last time you did something that nobody expected from you? Now, one of my clients wished me happy birthday, and they said to me, "Today, do something you haven't done in a long time." I was like, like what? What haven't I done in a long time? And they said, mix all the sodas. You know how when we were kids would mix Coke, Fanta, and thoroughly enjoy drinking it. And they said to me, "Do that. Mix all the sodas." And not because it's going to improve you, not because you'll be fitter for it, not because it will look good on IG, but simply because it will delight you. And I did exactly that, and I was delighted. And perhaps, and me saying this, perhaps your mind immediately says, "I don't have the time," or, "That's so childish," right? One of the things I love about watching children playing is how completely absorbed they become in the game. Have you ever watched a child building a sandcastle? They're not thinking about, "Oh, Sidri, I've got homework, Sidri, I've got what." They're not even worrying about whether the sandcastle will be standing tomorrow. They aren't wondering whether someone else has built a better sandcastle. For those few moments, they are completely present. And isn't that what so many adults are searching for? We keep talking about, oh, you have to be so present, you have to be aware. We spend hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds or shillings or dollars attending mindful retreats, downloading meditation apps, reading books about living in the present moments. Children arrive knowing how to do it. Play is mindfulness. It's full bodied presence. It's curiosity without an agenda. Perhaps that's one of the reasons losing play has such profound consequences. We don't just lose games, we lose one of the most natural ways our nervous system experiences safety. I sometimes think the opposite of anxiety isn't even calm, it's curiosity. Think about it, right? When you're deeply curious, our body softens. We're not tense. Our eyes widen, you lean in, you're open to discovery. Whereas an anxious nervous system narrows its focus. A curious nervous system expands. That's why children ask thousands of questions. Why? How? What happens if? Can I try? Can I climb it? Can I build it? Can I see? Can I? You know what I mean? They're constantly exploring. Then adulthood quietly begins replacing curiosity with certainty. We stop asking questions, we become experts, professional, responsible adults. Pooh. And somewhere, without noticing, we stop playing with ideas as well as toys. We stop wondering, experimenting. We stop giving ourselves permission to be beginners. We have to be experts. Amma, that's why adults are many adults are terrified of looking silly. Children don't mind looking silly. They expect to. Adults often mistake competence for safety. Children, I think, understand something we've forgotten. Growth has always looked a little bit messy, right? I remember watching a group of kids playing rugby once. They weren't keeping score, they weren't even worried about the technique. Half of them didn't even understand where the ball was meant to go, where the try line was, what the H was for. None of that. One kid completely ran in the opposite direction. His teammates were so tickled, and he laughed as well. Then they all turned around and continued playing like nothing happened. Nobody questioned whether he was athletic enough. Nobody suggested he should give up. They simply carried on. And I sometimes wonder what would happen if adults were allowed to learn like that, to make mistakes without being embarrassed, to try something new simply because it looks interesting, to laugh at ourselves without turning it into evidence that we're not good enough, right? Perhaps that's another thing children who never got to play lost. Not just play, but permission to be wonderful, wonderfully, gloriously imperfect. And let's sit with that for a moment. Notice your shoulders, notice your breath, notice your jaw, and clench your jaw. Now I'd like you to imagine something. Imagine you're walking past a park. You see your 8-year-old self running around laughing, completely absorbed in whatever game they're playing. You call their name. They run over, slightly out of breath. You ask them a simple question. What are you doing? They look at you as though you've asked the strangest question in the world. I'm playing. Why? Because it's fun. You're the one asking why, eh? Not the child who is asking why. So then they tell you, I'm playing. Then you ask, why? And they shrug and they're like, I see, because it's fun. There's no further explanation. There's nothing of productivity. There's no outcome. There's no reward. Just joy. And there's something deeply wise about that answer, don't you think? Somewhere along the way, we began believing that everything we do should have purpose. Maybe the joy is the purpose. Maybe delight isn't a distraction from life. Maybe it's one of the reasons we're here in the first place. And if that's true, then perhaps reconnecting with play isn't about becoming childish. It's about becoming fully human again. Now, as I've been talking today, some of you might have found yourself smiling at memories you hadn't visited in years. Others may have felt sadness that seemed to arrive out of nowhere. And that's the interesting thing about our memories. Sometimes it isn't our minds that remembers first, it is our bodies. There are moments in therapy when someone tells me a story from childhood with a smile on their face, but their tears falling down their cheeks. Their words are saying, it isn't that bad. But their nervous system is telling them a different story altogether. And I don't think we talk enough about the grief. That has nothing to do with death. There is grief for the childhood you never had, for the birthday parties you missed, because maybe there wasn't enough money, grief for the football matches you watched from the window because someone had to stay home and look after your younger siblings, grief for the afternoons that disappeared beneath the responsibility you were never meant to carry. And grief for the little version of you who became sensible before they ever got the chance to become carefree. Now, the difficult thing with this kind of grief is that it often feels invisible. Nobody holds a funeral for a childhood that slowly disappeared. There isn't a ceremony for the games you never played or the adventures you never had. Life simply keeps moving on. And eventually, people begin complimenting you on how mature you are. And I wonder how many adults have spent years being congratulated for the very adaptations that cost them their childhood. People will say things like, "You've always been so responsible," and they mean it as a compliment. "You've always had your head screwed on. You're wise beyond your years. You're an old soul." And perhaps you are. But perhaps you're also simply carrying far more than a child ever should. Let's meet Devo. David is 12 years old. Every Saturday morning, his friends disappear onto the football pitch at the local school. They spend hours arguing about imaginary fouls, celebrating spectacular goals, and occasionally forgetting whose ball it was in the first place. David hears them laughing from across the road when he's helping his dad in the family shop. His dad is not at unkind. He's doing everything he can to keep the business afloat. Money is tight, and we know how this economy of Kasongo is going. And so every pair of hand in the shop makes a difference, right? His dad keeps telling him maybe next week, and David nods. Next week comes, next week becomes next month, becomes next year. By the time David is leaving school, nobody is asking if he can come and play anymore. Years later, it is very successful, has his own business, he's respected, he's dependable. One afternoon, someone invites him to join a social football team. He laughs and says, "No thanks. I've never really been into football," except that isn't entirely true. It's just that he wasn't given enough opportunities to find out whether he loved it or not. Sometimes we mistake absence for preference. We tell ourselves, "I was never interested in music. I was never creative. I've never been adventurous." But how often is the truth something completely different? Perhaps there simply wasn't room. One of the things about children is they don't separate learning from playing. They learn because they're playing. Every game they invent is teaching them something about themselves. Every imaginary world they create is helping them discover possibilities. Every climb they tree with every tree they climb. Hey, I'm so into this. Every tree they climb whispers, "I wonder if I can." Play quietly builds confidence. Not the loud confidence that boasts, but the quieter confidence that says, I'll have a go. And think about that phrase for a moment, huh? I'll have a go. Children say it all the time. All the time. Adults don't. Adults normally say, "What if I fail?" Children will ask, "What happens if I try?" And now, somewhere between childhood and adulthood, curiosity is often replaced by caution. Now, caution has its place. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be caution. I don't recommend climbing trees in your 50s without first checking whether your knees have agreed with it. Although I do recommend climbing trees. It's so much fun. And doing cartwheels, yes, in your 50s, go for it. There's a video I was watching the other day where people have forgotten how to skip. It was so hilarious. And anyway, so I did a video that I was skipping, and my child told me, even me, I don't know how to skip. I was so mortified. I can skip. Anyway, some people would, kind of probably write to me and tell me, what do you mean climb trees at 50? You know, but did many of us just stop taking emotional risks long before we stopped taking physical ones? Huh? Did we stop trying things that we might not be good at? Did we stop singing because maybe someone checkered because we hit a very bad note? Or stop dancing because someone said we looked ridiculous doing the break dance? Did we stop painting because someone else's painting was better? It feels like we stopped dreaming because adulthood told us to be realistic. And so, slowly and without noticing it, life became something to manage instead of something to experience. And perhaps that's one of the greatest loss. Not that we become responsible, but that responsibility quietly crowded out wonder. I'd like you to picture yourself at about 7 years old. Imagine that they're sitting beside you. Not everybody knows that child. Not every and what I want you to imagine is the child that no one else knew. The child only you knew. The one with scraped knees, endless questions, wild ideas, and a laugh that just came from nowhere with no permission. Spend a moment simply looking at them. Now imagine asking them one question. What did you dream we'd become? Don't answer immediately. Just listen. Perhaps they wanted to be a pilot or a dancer, a footballer, a teacher, a scientist. Perhaps they simply just wanted to be happy. Whatever answer comes, notice whether your first instinct is to explain, to justify, to tell that little child why life turned out so differently. Instead, try something else. Simply thank them. Thank them for dreaming. Thank them for imagining the possibilities long before they knew how complicated adulthood would become. Because without that child who had a dream, without children who dream, adults forget that the future can be different from the past. Maybe healing isn't about becoming the child you once were. That child has done their growing. Maybe healing is about allowing the adult you've become to borrow something from them again, their curiosity, their imagination, their willingness to laugh at everything and nothing, the ability to be completely absorbed by a single beautiful moment. And perhaps that's what we're really searching for. Not childhood, but aliveness. And I wonder if the two are connected and we've never really realized. Now, you may be thinking that all sounds really lovely, Nemo, but I'm not 7 anymore. I've got children to raise, bills to pay, work tomorrow morning, and a body that keeps making strange noises every time I stand up. I get it. Life is busy, responsibility is real, and this isn't an invitation to ignore your responsibilities or pretend adulthood doesn't exist. It's an invitation to ask whether responsibility has quietly become the only language your nervous system speaks. One of the things I find myself saying to clients is that healing isn't always about doing more. sometimes healing is about remembering what you stopped doing. When people imagine healing, they often picture therapy, meditation, yoga, breathing exercise, or reading yet another self help book. And I happen to think all those things have their place in life. But sometimes healing looks so much more simple than that. It looks like buying the coloring pencils you weren't allowed as a child. Sometimes it looks like getting into the sea because you loved swimming before life became complicated. I've got a client amazing, amazing client who has started doing things that she wasn't able to do. So they've started learning swimming at 30 something. And they said to me, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to learn how to ride a bicycle. Do you know what I mean? Things that we dreamed of doing, or didn't even dream of doing, but want to do them now. Sometimes healing looks like kicking a ball with your kids instead of watching from the sideline, right? Um, Sometimes it looks like dancing at any time, even if your dancing resembles somebody trying to avoid stepping on Lego bricks. The point isn't how well you do it. The point is that your nervous system experiences something it hasn't felt for a long time. Freedom. It experiences freedom. One of the reasons I love yoga is that at its best, it invites us back into curiosity. It asks us to notice our bodies rather than judge them. Because there isn't a prize for being the most flexible person in the room. There isn't a gold medal for touching your toes. Every practice is simply an opportunity to ask, what does my body need today? Or what can my body do today? Yesterday, I was able to do a chaturanga. I was able to do a push up. Today, I need to use my knees to do that push up. And that's fine. Children ask that question naturally. Adults often ask a different one. What should I be doing? And they're not the same question. What does my body need today? What should I be doing? Not the same question. Children move because it feels good. They run until they're tired and then they stop. They'll roll down hills because someone has said, there's a hill. Let's roll down. And off they go. They balance on walls, jump over puddles. They hang upside down because they're curious about what the world feels like from a different angle. By the way, it's fun. It's fun hanging upside down. Adults, on the other hand, we often move because we're trying to burn calories, hit a target, close a ring, count the steps on our watch, to undo the effects of sitting at the desk all day long. Again, there's nothing wrong with having goals, but I wonder how often we ask ourselves to simply move just because it brings us joy. And maybe that's why children don't have to be persuaded because they know it brings them joy. Their bodies already know it's good for them. As adults, we become so disconnected from pleasure that we sometimes mistrust it. We feel guilty for resting, guilty for laughing, for saying no to work, guilty for taking a day off, for spending money on something that serves no practical purpose. What would happen if we just became a little suspicious of that guilt? Not because it's wrong, but because it's interesting. Whenever guilt appears, curiosity can follow. That's interesting. Why does sitting in the garden with a cup of tea make me feel as though I should be doing something else? Why do I apologize when someone catches me relaxing? Why do I believe that being busy makes me more worthy? And I think those are wonderful questions. They're questions that don't criticize, they're questions that invite understanding, not criticism. Hiya, let's meet Ruth. Ruth is 63. Her children have grown up and left home. She's recently retired after 40 years of working, raising a family, caring for aging parents. And for the first time in decades, her diary is empty. Everyone is telling her, go enjoy yourself, you've earned it. But Ruth has no idea what that means. She wakes up on a Monday morning feeling strangely anxious. She starts cleaning cupboards. She's been cleaning the cupboards even last week. She organizes the wardrobes that they don't need reorganizing. She finds jobs because she still feels uncomfortable. One afternoon, her granddaughter comes to visit carrying a jigsaw puzzle. And she says, "Come help me." Ruth almost replies, "I am busy." Then she stops herself. She sits on the floor, and for the next hour, they search for tiny blue pieces that all look the same. They laugh, they tell stories, they make absolutely no progress whatsoever in the puzzle. And when her granddaughter goes home, she notices something she hasn't felt in years. Her shoulders feel lighter. She hasn't solved a problem. She hasn't achieved anything measurable. Has not been one iota of productive, but she simply spent an hour playing, and somehow her body knew exactly what to do with that experience. One of the things we know about the nervous system is that it changes through experience, not through information alone. We can understand attachment theory, we can read every book about trauma, we can listen to podcasts like this one, and attend workshops and fill shelves with books about healing. But eventually, the body asks a different question: what are we doing differently? Because the nervous system learns through lived experience. Every time you laugh freely, your body learns something. Every time you create without worrying whether it's good enough, your body learns something. Every time you rest without apologizing, yes, your body learns something. Every time you allow yourself a moment of delight without trying to earn it first, your body quietly begins rewriting an old story. That story might once have been, life is about surviving. Slowly and gently, it becomes, life can also be enjoyed. I want to leave you with a small invitation for this week, and not homework, but an experiment. Um, I'd like you to spend just 15 minutes doing something your younger self would have loved. Not something your adult self thinks would be impressive, something your younger self would have chosen. Perhaps paint, perhaps bake, or go barefoot, walk barefoot in your garden or outside on the beach. Maybe buy a kite, actually. Make a kite. Do you remember how we used to make kites and be so delighted when those things flew? Make a flied. Make a kite. Fly it. Right? I was going to say perhaps you can listen to music louder than your neighbors would appreciate. Then I remembered I'm that neighbor who doesn't appreciate loud music. Maybe it's also just payback from those days I used to play loud music and not care about the neighbors. Perhaps you'll throw a rugby ball around. Whatever it is, pay attention to whatever happens in your body. Notice whether joy arrives easily. Notice whether guilt arrives first. Notice whether you keep checking the time, or there's like a voice in your head that tells you you should be doing something more useful. And don't argue with the voice, just notice it, because healing begins with noticing. And perhaps if you're very lucky, somewhere during those 15 minutes, you'll hear another voice, a quieter one, a younger one. The child who never really stopped waiting for somebody to say, it's your turn now. And let's just spend the next the final minutes, because we're coming to an end. Yes, I hear you sighing already. Yes, already. Uh, let's spend the final few minutes together just bringing this journey home. Let's sit together for one final moment. I invite you to notice your shoulders, notice your breath, notice your jaw. Take one slow breath in and an even slower breath out. And as we begin to bring this conversation to a close, I'd like us to return where we started. Do you remember Nema, the little girl who sat beneath the mango tree drawing impossible animals and magical villages where shoshos rode bicycles to the moon? The girl whose pencils started collecting dust, whose evenings just quietly became evenings of cooking and cleaning and helping and growing up. Nobody announced to her that childhood was over. It simply became less important than everything else. I think that's how many childhoods disappear. Not with a, again, not with a single dramatic event, but with a small, with thousands of small moments. A game gets postponed because somebody needed help. A ball is left in the corner because there were chores to finish. A dance never danced because someone might laugh. A dream quietly folded away because adulthood seemed more urgent. Huh? When we think about grief, we often think about losing people. Today, I'd like us to consider a different kind of grief. A grief. Yeah, my phone is ringing. Gatia, stop calling me. Anyway, the grief of experiences we never had, the friendships that might have been built through play, the confidence that grows when children are allowed to experiment without fear of failure, the imagination that develops when boredom is followed by curiosity instead of responsibility, the afternoons that might have been spent simply being children. And perhaps this is why conversations matter so much, not because we can go backwards, because we can't go backwards. None of us can give our younger selves the childhood they deserved even. But perhaps we can offer them something they never expected, a different adulthood, one where joy isn't something we earn after we've finished every task, one where rest isn't a reward for exhaustion, one where laughter doesn't need an excuse, but one where our nervous system slowly learn that life can be about more than surviving. One of the things I love most about children is how completely they throw themselves into the present moment, right? Really, really, really throw themselves into that moment. Do that. Throw yourself into a single moment. One that's not productive, none of that. None of that. I'm Nemo, and this has been Unclench Your Jaw with Nemo. Until next time, less judgment, more curiosity. Be gentle with yourself. And of course, do not forget to unclench your jaw. Asante.